Well, I can't tell you what you're doing wrong. All I can tell you is those coyotes either heard you, saw you, smelled you, or you set yourself up where you could not see what came into the call. And once, I can't, I wish I could tell everybody, if you go play this sound on this day, you will kill a coyote. I can't do that. You've got to learn your territory. You've got to learn how those coyotes move through that country. You've got to learn where you set yourself up for the best chance of getting a shot at them. And then there's Murphy's Law never ceases to amaze me with coyote hunting. If something can go wrong, if there is one tree, one bush, if there is one thing that will save that coyote's life, Murphy will rear its ugly head and that coyote will live. And it's amazing to me.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 247. Big Al Morris. Coyote management is essential for your deer herd. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Hunter's Blend Coffee. Awaken your hunt with coffee purchased directly from farmers around the world, creating jobs and alleviating poverty. Hunter's Blend Coffee, we're hunters too. Polar Works Coolers and the Chill Zone, specializing in the most durable, reliable thermal cups and coolers. Keep your drinks hot or cold in any element. Black Ash Outdoor Products reduce your risk of tree stand suspension trauma with a Tree Stand Wingman, the Tree Stand Emergency Descender System. Covert Scouting Cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. The Horny Buck Seed Company, it's all about the freshest seed. Morris's Sporting Goods, a full line of sporting goods without the sales tax. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/MERCH. The Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Cameron Coble, the Average Joe Blue Collar Bow Hunter, and you're listening to my number one favorite podcast of all time, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
This is Jim Berman from Western Extreme, and you're listening to my favorite Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Nick Munt from Bone Collector, and you're listening to my favorite deer hunting podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to j@bigbuckregistry.com. A coyote is going to eat what it needs to eat. It kills what it needs to kill. And taking one coyote out of the pack will save deer fawns. Al Morris says that coyote management is an essential tool for maintaining the health of your deer herd in your area. It's been over 2 years since we talked to Al Morris, and we thought a refresher crash course on coyote hunting was overdue. We dive deep into technique relative to the time of year that you're hunting coyote and how to use your buddy system setups. Al also shares some results from some studies, his latest call sequence, and when to use it effectively. We'll get to our entire interview with Big Al Morris in just 1 second, but before we do, let's turn to Jim Keller for the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week, Staten Island fawning over reduced deer population thanks to vasectomies. This story is from the dailynews.com website and was reported by Jillian Jorgensen. After years of reckless reproduction, The Staten Island deer population has dropped 8%, city officials told the Daily News, crediting an off-mocked program to perform vasectomies on male deer. 2 years into the plan and after the first mating season during which some of the bucks had been snipped, Anthony DiNicola's nonprofit company, White Buffalo, counted 1,884 deer this January. That's down from 2,053 his company counted using the same technique in 2017. The number of fawns observed is down 50% from 2 fawns per doe to 1 fawn per doe. The project, which from some corners has elicited snickers or sympathetic leg crossing, costs $3.6 million over 3 years, including an extra $300,000 budget increase that was required because Staten Island was home to even more deer than first suspected. It involves baiting, traps, shooting bucks with tranquilizer darts, and having vets perform a surgery that takes just a few minutes. The deer are then tagged. Mortality rate resulting from this process has been just 0.5%. The results reported this week show the results of 2016's vasectomies when the program operated on just above 50% of the burrow's bucks. But in 2017, they were able to treat 87% of the bucks, and the ones they didn't get to are younger, DiNicola said, and less likely to breed since the bigger bucks, even though snipped, will still be in the mood for love and will push them out of the way. DiNicola will go back for those young bucks in the next round of vasectomies, which will begin in the fall. Editor's note. That's a change from 2,053 to 884, a 169 deer reduction for $3.6 million or $21,302 per deer. Balta man sentenced for illegally killing multiple deer. This story is from the KFGO radio website. A Balta, North Dakota man who admitted illegally killing deer has been ordered to pay more than $2,800 in restitution and fees and had his hunting privileges suspended for 2 years. 62-year-old Darrell Klein also must forfeit a rifle and scope to the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. This case began with a tip that led a game warden to discover about 20 dead deer around a Balta area farmstead in January of 2017. Klein admitted he had shot and killed at least 7 deer because he was frustrated with the deer eating his grain. The court put a $350 value on each deer he admitted killing. Shed hunter finds enormous deer head in Pennsylvania. This story is from the Wide Open Spaces website and was posted by Colton Bailey. Shed hunting has become extremely popular, and if you've tried it, you know how addicting it can be. You're also familiar with the feeling you get when you see tines shining in the woods. It's what keeps shed hunters coming back to the woods time and time again. However, something you don't like to find on shed hunts are those dead heads, or dead bucks for those who don't know the shed hunter lingo. Sure, it's nice to find, but it means you won't be able to hunt that buck anymore. Well, Ryan McCarthy found one of the most incredible deadheads we've seen this year on some public ground in Pennsylvania. This 219 5/8 inch giant of a buck would make anyone's emotions go through the roof. This is an absolute monster buck, especially for Pennsylvania. Of course, many rumors and accusations have already started flying, claiming the deer was a high-fenced find. None of those rumors have been verified. However, you never want to discount an incredible animal like this, as it may have been a true blue public land giant. Lightning strike permanently grounds over 100 geese. This story is from the OutdoorHub.com website. In what can only be described as a freak weather event, a lightning strike caused over 100 geese to fall dead from the sky over this past week in Idaho Falls, Idaho. The discovery of the permanently grounded gaggle was made by Conservation Officer Jacob Burrell. Local news affiliate Idaho Statesman has more on the story. I quote, Conservation Officer Jacob Burrell came across a shocking sight Saturday night. More than 50 dead geese had plunged into a parking lot near his Idaho lab. The discovery in Idaho Falls followed a storm with lightning and golf ball-sized hail, reported the East Idaho News, suggesting the geese were killed by a lightning strike while migrating north to Canada. Several of these geese had their stomachs blown open and all of them were dead. None were injured, Burrell told the publication. Hail likely would have knocked them out of the sky, but they would have been able to glide down and land at different places. Burrell collected the bodies of 48 snow geese and the 3 Ross's geese in a 100 to 200-yard radius of the parking lot. Teresa Keim told KIFI on Tuesday that she found 60 more dead geese on the roof of Yellowstone's Warehouse, a self-storage company, bringing the total to at least 112. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Daniel Applebaum for leads in some of this week's stories. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Big Al Morris. Al Morris, welcome back to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
How you been, Jay?
Doing well, brother. It's the snow's melting, and I want to talk coyote because it's been a couple of years since we've discussed this topic, and I think it's a crucial element of deer hunting is predator hunting.
Coyote management on your deer hunting properties is huge. I mean, you want that 5 to 8 year old buck growing out there, but if he don't make it past these first 6 months, he's never going to get there. So
that's right.
Managing these coyotes is probably one of the most critical elements. You can spend all that money for the tractors and the food plots and the seed and you can make the best ground in the country, but if it's loaded with coyotes and you're not getting those fawns through their first year, you're not going to grow those big bucks. So,
right.
Or the does that are going to produce those bucks. So It's just critical.
I think it is. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. I'm trying to emphasize the importance of this. So every time I can talk to you and get into any of the new things that are going on in the coyote hunting world, and I don't know if they change, but that's why we're going to talk about it. I want to touch base on this kind of stuff. You know,
it's an evolving sport. As the coyote expands its range, which, there isn't a state in the union that doesn't have them with the exception of Hawaii. I mean, that's the only place that there isn't coyotes, and give somebody time, they'll be there. Gotcha. It's like putting walleye in lakes you don't want walleye in. It's like, I wish somebody would put coyotes in Hawaii. That'd give me an excuse to go there. But anyway, you just, as it evolves, as coyote hunting evolves and more people are doing it, there's a lot of good techniques out there right now that I think guys can employ. Not only the calling, but they can get trappers to come in there and trap some of those coyotes. And here's the deal. Here's what I don't think most people understand is if you have 100 coyotes on your place and you kill 75 of those coyotes, the 25 left will get you back to 101 pup crop.
Gotcha.
So you can't get rid of them. Once you have coyotes, you can't possibly get rid of them. If you hammer them, all that does is your neighbor, where you don't have permission to kill them, they're going to come over the fence. They're going to come under the fence. All these places in Texas with high fences, they've got issues with the coyotes. But you just want to knock off the 10, 15 a year. And that's 3 to 5, 6, 10 deer a year that coyote would kill and eat that you're saving. So any technique you can employ to trim off those 3, 6, 10 coyotes a year off your place, you're saving fawns.
Gotcha. One of the beauties of coyote hunting, I think this goes for most states. You'll know this way better than I will. Coyotes can be hunted currently, and I know there's been some attempts to regulate this some more in certain states, but you can hunt them all year round, pretty much.
In Arkansas, I know they have a season, and I'm sure there's like in Alaska, there's a season that you can only kill coyotes. It's crazy to me that, if there is a season in your state, try to go to your state legislature, try to go to your Game and Fish Commission and tell them this is retarded. We should be able to chase them 24/7. And I've gone through a transition in the last 5 years of my coyote calling career from just hunting them in the fall or winter when their hides are good to now I hunt them 24/7, 365. And I've learned so much by hunting coyotes in the spring, summer, fall, winter. It's been an amazing transition in my coyote calling to learn to hunt them year round.
Gotcha. The last time we spoke was about 2 years ago, around this time of year. Has anything changed in the techniques, styles, strategies? Are coyotes getting call shy since the advent of the fabulous Fox Pro calls that are out there?
Here's the deal. In 2 years, we've sold a lot more Fox Pros, so there's more guys out doing it. Okay. And, what hasn't changed is it's the same game. You go out there, press buttons, and you try to get those animals to get excited and come look at you. Now, my technique hasn't changed in 2 years. And you can and I don't know if 2 years ago I said this, and I may have, but you can base the entire year. You can base everything, how you call coyotes, you can base around them having breeding and having their pups. And then the rest of that spring, summer, all they're doing is killing stuff to guarantee those pups will survive. And then August, September, October, what happens? Mom and dad kick those pups out. And so it's called the dispersal period. And that's a great time. There's more coyotes than there'll be the rest of the year. They're relatively stupid, those pups. They've got the eyes, they've got the ears, they've got the legs, the nose to go out and hunt, but they may not be great hunters. So they're just learning how to hunt. And it's a great time to hammer those pups and those first year coyotes. And a coyote only lives 7-8 years tops in the wild. And so no matter how smart a pair of coyotes you have, you're only going to have to deal with that smart pair. If you cannot get them killed, or if they get educated, you only have to deal with them for about 5, 6, 7 years. And then, they die, and it's a whole nother set of coyotes that you're dealing with. Some coyotes are deer killing specialists, and those are the ones that I really think a guy that's trying to raise deer, he needs to understand. If he's got a pair of deer killing specialists, they need to get those coyotes out of their territory so that they can grow those deer. And so everything's based, the last few years I've started to realize how important that breeding sequence is, and then having their pups, raising their pups during the summer, and then that fall transition into breeding season again in February. Coyotes typically breed February 15th. They can start as early as January. End of December, I've seen coyotes spotting and breeding. I've seen them breed out until March. It depends on the spring, how cold, how wet, late spring snows can kill those pups if they can't feed them. And so that whole biology of the year of the coyote, that's how I base it. And techniques are, in certain parts of the country, I don't think the coyotes are hungry. I think there's so many mice, so many things for them to eat. Like that, when I was down in Alabama, there was tons of catfish ponds. Well, those guys would drive around them catfish ponds and net out any dead catfish and throw them on the bank. And those coyotes were never hungry. They never had to come to a prey distress sound. So vocalizations were key to those coyotes in Alabama, in the Black Belt region there of Alabama. And the last few years I've been hunting from California to Vermont, Texas to Alberta, Canada. And it really has, I've got some universal sequences that if you've watched Fur Takers, if you go online to our YouTube channel, you'll see my sequence. Single lone howls is the number one thing that coyotes will respond to, and non-aggressive single lone howls. That's how coyotes communicate. So if you can insert yourself into a food plot, if you can insert yourself into a plowed field, edge of, it can be the thickest hardwood timber in the country. If that's where those coyotes are living. And that's what I want to emphasize to everybody. We were, before we got on live here, you mentioned something about maybe discussing how there's the eastern coyote versus the western coyote.
Right.
And as I told you before the show here, I think the only difference is densities. Like the only place I have not filmed a TV show was in Georgia. I was south of Savannah there, just a few miles, and I got my feelings hurt. But the reason I got my feelings hurt is there wasn't many coyotes there. Those guys had been seeing them. They had trail camera pictures of black coyotes, of red coyotes, of all these different colored coyotes. But that was through the year, 12 months. They only had 4 or 5 pictures to show me. And yes, I was seeing coyote tracks. And after 3 nights of howling, doing my techniques to locate these coyotes, I only heard 2 live coyotes the entire time we were there for 3 days in Georgia. And they just didn't have that many coyotes. They saw them. They called them in during turkey season. They saw them during their deer season. But the reality was where we were at, that property that we had permission to run just didn't have very many coyotes. So I got my feelings hurt. I didn't get a show shot there. But the only deer, a coyote is a coyote is a coyote. They're going to, there's 4 things. There's 4 reasons you'll get a coyote to come to you. He's hungry and he hears something he wants to eat. So that's the prey distress sound, whether it's bird distress, rabbit distress, deer distress. There's porcupine. You can use kitten distress. There's chicken distress. There's pheasant distress. There's a million distresses you can play. And each one I think is valid. Especially in the country where there's wild hogs and stuff, you can play that little piggy it's called. And man, I've got some amazing responses from coyotes on that sound. As well as pigs coming in and other things. So you never know what you're going to call in when you do that.
Okay.
But so their hunger is going to get them to come in. They're territorial, and that's where those single lone howls. And then breeding season, they're going to breed, and they'll do those breeding sequences, which is the high pitch stuff. And then when they have their pups, they protect their pups. Those are the four things. Those are the four cylinders that I try to fire on. Now, when there's no pups in the den, when it's August, September, October, there's no reason to play those canine pups and those sounds that are pup whimpers and things like that. But Coyote Pup Distress 3 is really good. It's a high pitch. Coyote Pup Screams, and those work really good in February, March, April, May, June, July when they have those pups.
Okay.
And finding those cylinders and creating those scenarios, and I guess that's what we can get into more, Jay, is the scenarios that I think guys need to be playing at certain times of the year.
And I think that's very key because, and I'm gonna go back to last year. I really got into coyote hunting as a deer management practice, and it went both to I went to the calling. I set up some bait sites legalized with landowners and through the state and night hunting when it was eligible.
Awesome.
And I had a great time. Now, like you said, I had a hard time finding coyotes doing my night runs, going miles and miles and miles. I think I got one howl back over the course of, 25 miles. I was like, oh man, I don't know what's going on. And I ended up falling back on a bait site and actually ended up killing one. I knew there was another one in the area, but even there where we knew they're feeding on deer carcasses and calves that had died during the winter that the landowner was placing there, we had more eagles and bobcats than we had coyotes.
Well, and that tells you that your problem there wasn't as bad as you maybe thought it was.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. But even that one, you took out that one coyote, you just saved 3 or 4 or 5 fawns. And it's not just the fawns; they can take the adult deer. So just that one coyote's huge.
Gotcha. I mean, and I think I had a great time. I got to be honest. I looked forward to going out each and every day just before dark. And I didn't hit a lot of morning sets, just wasn't working in my schedule, but I was hitting the evening almost daily up until baseball season started when I started coaching. It was phenomenal. Got me through that dead of the winter where you're craving some kind of activity. Yeah,
to get out.
Yeah, and we were hiking through some deep snow, but man, it was fun. Mm-hmm. Man, it was fun just to get out and actually have some opportunity.
Were you seeing tracks
in
the snow?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, they're there. They're making, and the other thing I've noticed throughout the country is I do seminars across the country. It was awesome. I flew into Kalamazoo, Michigan, and those guys were great. They're at DNR Sports in Kalamazoo. I was doing a seminar on a Saturday. Well, Friday night I fly in at 10:30 at night, and Cody and the boys swoop me up at 10:30. We go out there. 3 stands later, they're holding the coyote. So it impressed upon me that I could fly to Michigan, a kid from Utah that doesn't know anything about Michigan coyotes, flew in there, and in 3 stands, they were holding a dead coyote that I called into 100 yards. And I was sitting there with a handheld thermal, and I saw the coyote coming before those guys did. And I started yelling, "There's a coyote!" And I'm like,
right
over here. But it was really exciting to go to a complete, total strange place. I'd never set foot there. They said they had coyotes, and we go out in 3 stands and call one in. It proved to me that my sequences are good, and especially that time of year in January 25th or whatever it was when I went to Kalamazoo, and those boys have been tearing them up. I took those boys out, showed them how I would do. I do female yodel howl, male coyote howl, female soar howl. They're single howls and they're not too aggressive. The female soar howl is a little more aggressive, but she just sounds like a big old coyote that's telling the world, I'm in your territory. And then I go into pup screams. I go into diaphragm. I use a diaphragm a lot. The Gun Series diaphragms that we have from Fox Pro are just awesome.
Okay.
And there's several companies making good diaphragms out there, but you can't go wrong with any of them. Learn how to use it. Diaphragms can be exasperating, I know, but there's lots of turkey callers, lots of elk callers out there and if we can get these coyote hunters the only thing I have proven, with the exception of Georgia, was you give me a diaphragm, a gun series diaphragm and a Fox Pro collar, I really don't think there's coyotes anywhere in the country I can't call in. Now, it all depends on the densities and how many coyotes are in the area. But if you're seeing tracks, as you're hiking through the snow, if you're seeing tracks, then I think the challenge for those areas that have coyotes, but the densities aren't real high, what your challenge then is to find out when that coyote is on that property you have permission to hunt. And it could be every third day, every fifth day, every 6 days. I can't tell you how often that coyote's on that territory. But if you can start anticipating when those coyotes will come through your place you have permission to hunt, as you anticipate those days, it's been 2 days since I've heard them. It's been 2 days since I've seen their tracks, but they come in there about every 3 days, 4 days. If you go in there and set up on that third or fourth day, you stand a good chance of that coyote hearing those sounds that you're putting out there. And that's how you'll increase your success. The more you're out there, and as you said, you learned a lot. You went out there and had a lot of fun during a dead time of the year, and I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Now, I gotta ask this question because it's been kind of bugging me.
Nice.
Like with deer hunting pressure, and despite the much smaller numbers of coyote hunters in and around my area, and this is obviously very subjective to my.
Where's home?
I am in New Hampshire.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So what we hear, as coyote hunters, as you kind of start cruising the roads and making sounds and all these things and talking to other people that are doing it, you're realizing that there are other coyote hunters out there and that they are practicing the same things that you are.
Right.
It's got me wondering, is there a situation where coyote pressure comes into play where you've got the same?
You're gonna hate me.
Okay.
So they did a study, and it was one of those electrotherapy things where they had collars on these coyotes and they would shock them.
Yeah.
And they would, if they did it right, if they did the sequence the way they wanted to, they got a food reward. If they didn't do the sequence right, they got shocked.
Okay.
Guess how long it took them to forget about that shock therapy?
Guessing it was pretty quick.
3 hours.
Right. Okay.
3 hours after shocking the crap out of those coyotes, it's like they completely forgot about that sequence.
Gotcha.
So this guy is telling me that he only thinks a coyote has a 3-hour memory. Now, there are hundreds of guys out there that will tell you, oh, hell no, that coyote will not come to that call after I called him in and shot at him and missed, or
right.
I wounded him,
right.
or I chipped hair off of his shoulders or anything else. That being said, I think those coyotes are just a product of their environment. They get good. If you squeak a fence, if they smell human, if you make noise, if you slam that door getting out of that pickup and they can hear that,
mm-hmm.
they know a dude's out of his truck.
Gotcha.
So I think there are, and I think you could douse yourself with any of the cover scents. For years I worked for Hunter Specialties and we had to spray down every time and blah, 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 blah. I don't think a coyote smells a Big Mac. I think a coyote smells 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. And he can tell you all that in 0.002 seconds, and so I don't think that you can do enough scent control to defeat their noses. But I honestly think that if you think you're dealing with a smart pair of coyotes, it's that they have their territory figured out. They know where you're going to call from or where you have called from in the past, and you have to switch that up. And I'm mostly a Western guy. Okay. And I've really opened my eyes the last 5 years that the Fox Pros had me travel the country. But I honestly think we are the creatures of habit more so than a coyote. The coyote's out there going to make a living, and he's going to do whatever it takes to survive. He's going to kill whatever he can kill. He's going to eat whatever. They vacuum up everything. And it doesn't matter whether it's watermelon, peas that are, corn that's sweet. They'll eat sweet corn. They'll eat grapes. They'll eat olives that ripen in the trees in California. It's amazing to me what a survivor the coyote is. Now, we as humans, if we hunt from the same roads, if there's a place out west, I've got a tip. There's a place out here that's desert for miles, and the sagebrush is about 2 feet tall, 24 to 36 inch tall sagebrush. But there's one knob in this one valley. You can see when it snows, the same guys doing the same coyote hunting, pull behind that knob, hike over the knob, and call this huge sagebrush valley. Well, no coyote that once those pups get educated that don't go to the knob, those guys are calling from there, But if you just get out of your truck and walk 2.5 miles out across that valley where there's no roads and call the opposite direction, those really smart coyotes are dumb as posts. They'll come rolling in. And so I honestly think we as humans, we kind of get the same thing. We get those big fancy high-powered scopes now, and the big fancy high-powered guns, our 6 Creeds, our 6.5 Creedmoors, our 22 250s. We want to call where we can get coyotes to open themselves up from 0 to 600 yards. We'll kill them. So everybody tends to call from the same locations. And what I'm telling guys, and what I'm really getting some positive feedback, telling them, forget where everybody else calls. Forget where you think you ought to call. Get you a shotgun. Go into the densest hardwoods where those coyotes are holed up during the daylight hours. Go in there, play the odd sound, the chicken distress, the kitten distress, play something weird, pig distress. Even the guys in Pennsylvania, I tell them to play Little Piggy, they killed a coyote with it. They get in there with the shotguns, get a guy 50 yards downwind of you in the collar, and get another guy 150 yards downwind, and get in the thickest stuff you can get and stand there with your shotguns and go to work. And guys are killing coyotes doing that because those coyotes don't think it's a person calling. There's nobody's ever called from this set of hardwoods. Nobody's ever done that technique, and they're killing coyotes they wouldn't otherwise kill because they're doing something that nobody else is doing. And that's my advice. I don't think the coyotes are that smart. Coyotes are a product of their environment. They're a product of their exposure to humans. And if they learn how to grow those pups and teach those pups how to live in proximity to humans and in those low density areas, there's places that are high density that they get really good at living close to people because they listen to the signs. They know when they hear that door slam, that fence squeak, or that truck stop up on the ridge and then go to call. And they know not to go to that call because that's going to be a person. But if you walk in there a mile and a half, call from the bottom instead of the top, if that's where the road is on top, or instead of calling from the bottom, you hike up to the top of the ridges or the valleys or wherever you hike into the back 40 acres that there's no roads back to that back, the little extra time, the little extra effort may turn a really smart coyote into a really dumb one just because you completely fool them. And if they only have a 3-hour memory, it tells me that they're not superhuman Einstein smart animals. They're just really good at living in their environment. And you have to insert yourself, be a little woodsy. How do you teach woodsmanship? How do you teach somebody to be sneaky and getting into their spots unseen, unsmelled, unheard? Those are the keys to killing coyotes.
Okay. All right. So you're saying that, and we talked about this in the show a couple of years ago, is they tend to like to run where they can roam naked, so to speak. So that you're saying that
yes,
if you're in an area that is kind of easy to get to, high visibility, easy walk, that may not be your best side.
That's not your spot. That's not where that coyote's going to come running into a call. That coyote's going to avoid those areas because that's where he's been called to before. That's where he exposed himself and got shot at, or he got, he saw that vehicle or he's had a negative experience there. And if he can't remember that negative experience after 3 hours, then what are we talking about? But I honestly think that it may not be that it's front of their memory, but it may be they like, I just don't like being here because I'm exposed, and that
it does seem like there may be, because it's an easier location for a human to get to, that it may get overused by the same hunters over and over, and that
and private land takes some of that away. I mean, not everybody's trespassing, not everybody's doing it, but just because there's private posted no trespassing signs, we all know there are some people out there that don't adhere to that law.
Right.
And so you think that your uncle's place isn't getting called, but it might be getting hammered, and you're not there when they are. So you don't know.
Okay. Let's talk about some setups, and then I want to get into some call sequences stuff that you might run at certain times of the year. If it seems to me that most coyote hunters are either going out in single or pairs, meaning that they're either by themselves or they're with a buddy. And I wanted to kind of talk about the two different setups. So if you're flying solo, you're going out on your own hunt, and you've got the Fox Pro with you, where would you place that Fox Pro in relative to your final shooting location?
So I carry a shotgun and a rifle to every stand. Why? Because I'm really a terrible rifleman. And if anything, I call them the drive-by coyotes, the drive-by shootings, where that coyote runs in, smells the call, and runs out. And if you're sitting there with a bolt action rifle, even with an AR-15, you commence firing, and you may get 1 or 2 or 3 good shots at that coyote while he's at full speed. Now, where I place that caller, typically you will catch me 30 to 50 yards directly downwind.
Okay.
Why am I directly downwind of that caller? Because every coyote on this planet, I don't care whether they're brand new, never been hunted coyotes that are only 6 months old, they circle to smell what's making that sound. And so it doesn't matter what sound I'm playing. It seems like those coyotes feel better if they can smell what it is that's in distress. So they will circle downwind. Now, what sucks about the coyote circling downwind is if they're in a heavily paranoid area, I've seen them circle up to 350 yards downwind.
Wow.
Of that caller. And they can tell you, oh, that's Big Al from Utah. He's got a stinky butt and he's got oil on his shotgun. And,
right.
Or he ate a cheeseburger for lunch. I mean, that coyote will know that and turn and leave. And I've had coyotes come into my scent cone, smell it. You can tell it just offends them. But they're so hungry, they're so desperate for that rabbit that they hear that they just ignore that smell. They keep coming. And I just shake my head. I go, did you see him smell me and keep coming? And that, those coyotes, they've got to eat. That January, February, March, when it's cold, when we're in those negative temperatures, those coyotes have to eat or they will. They've got great hides, but they can only go so many days without food. They've got to get that caloric intake so they can stay warm. They're just like us. They got to eat. And so when I'm by myself, 30 to 50 yards downwind.
Okay.
Now, every set is different. There are times when I know I'm only going to get a shot. There's just, for whatever reason, I will put the caller 20 yards directly behind me and I will work forward 20 yards. So anything that comes that I want out of this basin or out of this set of trees, if they come, and sometimes I'll put it 50 to 100 yards behind me out in the open. And I'm in a gully or some thick stuff that I know that's where the coyote's going to come through. And I know I'm going to get an up close personal shotgun in their face. I'm going to shoot them in the face with that BB Hornady load and they're done. But typically I'm 30 to 50 yards downwind of that caller.
Okay. All right. You're going in with a buddy. Now you're pairing up.
Now you just doubled everything you can do.
Okay.
If those coyotes are circling, if you honestly, and I hate that when you're sitting there 30 yards downwind of your caller and you're by yourself and you get done, you get up and you walk back to your truck, and what do you see? A pair of coyotes has circled at 100 yards, gone all the way around you, and you never saw them.
I had that happen to me a few times last year, actually. And we were using the buddy system. We were just spread out in the opposite locations. They came in from where we went in, how we got into the set. They had circled back through there. Never saw them.
And then they smell where you walked, and then they're like, nope, this ain't good. We're out of here.
Right.
And so with the buddy, and after you hunt your area for a while, you guys will figure out, well, if that's where they're going to come from, dude, set here. I'm going to go 100 yards up here, set up. If these buggers circle to smell us like they did last time, you're in the catbird seat. And if you've got 2 buddies, then you're tripling, you can really get fancy on them. You can put one guy 100 yards downwind. You can put a guy 100 yards on the back door. And man, there's nothing, there are some setups with 2 or 3 guys, nothing should get within 100, 150 of you that you guys don't kill. And it's just learning your area. It's learning how to set up in there. And don't be afraid to just go, I can't see 30 yards in this really thick hardwood timber area, but you know what? It's good enough for me. And then, George, you go up there 60, 80, 100 yards, and you can see down into that next gully. If they circle to get our wind in there, you might get a shot at them. And so that's the beauty of having a buddy system is you can, and the more you hunt your areas, the more you spend time in there, and the more you have interaction with these coyotes, the more you'll figure out, okay, them buggers are constantly coming in. If we walk in here, that's where they're coming. Set up, leave Joe there and shoot that bugger when he comes in to smell your tracks.
Okay. So if you had a double set with 2 guys going into one set, would you still put yourself 30 to 50 yards downwind of the call and then have the buddy go somewhere else? What would
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's no reason for you both to, especially if you're, and let's face it, they only count when they're dead. So me and Garvin, over the 21 years we've hunted together in contests, we've perfected the buddy system.
Right.
Now, there are times we're only 10, 15 yards apart, but that 10 or 15 yards, we're covering two completely different fields of fire.
Okay.
And that's really what you're breaking a coyote stand into, is fields of fire. Where are you going to get your shot? And with the Fox Pro, you can manipulate where those coyotes should appear. If you're working on another set, let's say you were there at 5 a.m., just before light, an hour before light, 30 minutes before light, 15 minutes before light, and they open up and start howling in that hollow or in that set of trees, they're there. So you move in and set up. You know where those coyotes should come from. And with two of you spread out 50, 100, 150, 200 yards apart, one of you should get a shot if they react to the call. And there's no guarantees. There's days the fish don't bite. There's days the coyotes won't call. And I, people call me all the time. I answer emails daily from Fox Pro of guys calling in and say, I've bought this Fox Pro. I've been out 30 times. I haven't seen a damn thing. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you what you're doing wrong. All I can tell you is those coyotes either heard you, saw you, smelled you, or you set yourself up where you could not see what came into the call. And once, I wish I could tell everybody, if you go play this sound on this day, you will kill a coyote. I can't do that. You've got to learn your territory. You've got to learn how those coyotes move through that country. You've got to learn where you set yourself up for the best chance of getting a shot at them. And then there's Murphy's Law never ceases to amaze me with coyote hunting. If something can go wrong, if there is one tree, one bush, if there is one thing that will save that coyote's life, Murphy will rear its ugly head and that coyote will live. And it's amazing to me across I killed my first coyote when I was 12. I'm 51. So I've almost been doing it 40 years. I'm 1 year shy of 40 years of coyote calling.
Wow.
And it amazes me how lucky some of these dang coyotes are.
Yeah. And you had told me going into this, said they will Murphy you at all opportunity.
I cannot believe how many times filming throughout the years. I've been professionally filming since 99, 97. We've been putting coyotes on professional video. I cannot believe how one bush, one tree has saved hundreds of coyotes' lives. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And we've been in Murphy situations, even as a partner system where you saw a flash and you needed one more step. And if you were 10 yards closer, you definitely would have got the shot, but you weren't. And they took off. It's just the way it is.
One day we were out in Nevada and we just made a pact between the four of us. We were just going to drive 2 miles and you had to get out. And it didn't matter. We were on a back dirt road in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. And every 2 miles, somebody had to get out. The next 2 miles, the other guy got out. The next 2 miles. And so there you are, literally dropped off in the middle of a barren wasteland there is not a bush for 2 or 3 miles. You're out there in the middle of nowhere, and we would sit there and start calling. And we killed 12 coyotes that day. And we called coyotes in places we would have never, ever made a stand. And what it showed me is you just can't predict where those coyotes are living in a system. All you can do is get out every mile and a half, 2 miles, and make stands where you have permission. And it might surprise you if you start calling from locations you would never think a coyote would come from. And we have literally, in Arizona, you have to be 400 yards from a structure that's occupied. Mm. And we will literally range find 410, 420 from an occupied building.
Yep.
And we have killed the snot out of coyotes right outside of these towns and stuff. It just will not surprise you where these coyotes are making a living. It won't. I promise you, if you'll make stands in places you've never even dreamt of, it might surprise you how many coyotes you start killing.
So it makes me think of different spots. Okay, so you are familiar as a hunter, as a coyote hunter, with certain areas, and you know it very well. However,
yes, you get intimate with it.
yeah, you get intimate. You kind of know where the set should be. However, you're also so familiar with, hey, this was all tracked up last year. This year it's not. So we need to change our strategy, which means you probably should explore some new terrain that you've never been in. How do you go about deciding where terrain is? I know we've talked about your circle of calls where you set out in the evening or night and you do your calling from different locations. Is there anything else to that strategy as far as the terrain, Google Maps, that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can get on the maps and see where the water sources are. I mean, and so my spring, summer hunting, you can bank that they will have those pups by June 1st, June 15th. Those pups will be within walking distance of a water source. So you can start dissecting your summer hunting up just like you would out west hunting elk from water sources. And it's actually really paid off. And then there's rendezvous sites. I don't know if I talked about rendezvous sites on our last podcast, but coyotes
we haven't talked about that before.
Coyotes have rendezvous sites. It's places they gather. And it's wolves, and it was watching documentaries on these wolves and I know coyotes have the same. Wolves have rendezvous sites. They're typically flat, no brush, and it's where they could fight. It's where they can be dominant, and other subordinate wolves or coyotes will come in and pay homage to the dominant male. And anyway, pond dams, roads with no brush can be these rendezvous sites. So you can actually pick rendezvous sites up from Google Earth. And I've actually gone, I'm going to call here, this pond dam, and this road. And I've killed coyotes at all three from a Google Earth, looking at Google Earth and putting all the things together. And so finding these rendezvous sites, finding these places where coyotes can run naked. I mean, I honestly think that if you can find these places where these coyotes are living day in, day out and start to manipulate how to get in there without being seen, heard, or smelled, and start playing sounds that they may not come to a prey distress sound. They may not be hungry, but coyotes are always territorial. And so if you can start to learn how to howl, make that single lone howl, be that pup that's lost or that pup that's in a new territory. And I think, honestly, they're like, I know I've said it before, they're like pinballs in a pinball machine. They just bounce from dominant pair to dominant pair. That August, September, October, November, December, those pups are just trying to find a place to make a living. And then February rolls around, they may not mate up that first year, but by year 2, those coyotes are going to find a mate, and they're going to find a core home area, and they'll defend that to the death, or they'll fight for it. And if you can find those areas where coyotes fight, where coyotes are trying to survive, insert yourself in there without being seen, play some good vocalizations on those Fox Pros, good vocalizations on a diaphragm, you'll increase your coyote killing potential 100-fold.
Okay, cool. Very cool. What are you looking at on the mapping aspects from satellite imagery that you're keying in on as potential rendezvous sites? Any
pond dam, any flat area that's relatively open, not thick. Because when they fight, they don't want to run into stuff. They want it to be an open, flat. Pond dams are the number one. That's if I had to pick one single rendezvous site for a coyote, it would be an earthen pond dam bank that has no brush or trees on it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So that's my number one spot. The next spot is a road or an open area that's on a berm, a hill, any place that's open relative to, and then I look for the water. Where's the water? Where's the creeks? Where's the, lakes, other things like that, everybody's got to have water. Everybody's got to have feed. Everybody's got to have cover. It's no different than your whitetails. Your whitetail, you have the thermal cover. You have the feeding areas, the bedding areas. Coyotes have loafing areas. They'll hunt early. They'll hunt out into the open nothings while it's dark. And then at night, they'll go back into what I call a loafing area, which is typically an elevated area that they can, from that 10 to 2, they can either be out in the sun, they can work their way out into some sunshine if they're cold, or they can be in the shade if they're hot. And but they can listen. They'll be in proximity to areas that hold deer, that rabbits, the turkeys. They'll listen for anything that might be a potential meal.
Gotcha. So you're kind of liking dammed up areas that have as rendezvous spots mostly. That gets you excited.
Oh yeah, when I find a good rendezvous site, and what's good about a good rendezvous site is it'll be good forever.
Okay.
I mean, and if you go in there and you kill that edge, if you can go in there and not educate them, if you can call them in, shoot them, and that area, if it was good for those coyotes, it can be as little as 24 hours. It can be as much as a month, 2 months, 3 months. Another pair of coyotes will go, I wonder what happened to George and Henrietta, but we're going to move in here. And if you kill the dominant male, another male and female may come in and push that female out because she doesn't have her mate anymore. And it just, good spots will remain good throughout your life.
Okay. When you're looking at these rendezvous spots, say you went on Google Maps and you said, hey, we got to find some new spots, and you see this one, I don't know, dammed up area. You have a little stream coming through. Looks like it got a little backed up, beaver dam, whatever. You think that's a good spot to go look at. Do you go ground check that? And if you do,
absolutely.
Okay.
I will just walk in there and I'll look for the tracks, especially if you have snow on the ground. It's just a great time. If everything's frozen, you can kind of move easier, but I'm not afraid to go in there in the summertime either. I'm always constantly looking. When I find these good areas, or when I'm walking or chasing my dogs, I'm always looking for those spots that have lots of tracks, lots of scat. And there's nothing better than actually seeing a coyote. I mean, that's just when you actually see a coyote in that spot, well, this is ground zero. And that's why those guys that are deer hunting, turkey hunting, when you see coyotes on those trails, when you see them coming past your tree stand, keep track. You may not want to take that shot because you got a big old 170, 180 inch buck that you want to kill. So you don't want a blood trail leaving out of your, they say you only get so many days on these big bucks to go in there and sit before, your scent or whatever distributes, and those big bucks will never come by that tree again. But, I honestly think where you see coyotes, where you physically see a coyote, that's the best indication that that's where you need to be hunting them.
Okay. So density plays a fair role in your.
It's huge.
So and it kind of makes sense. I mean, numbers are numbers. If you're going into a spot that, like, I don't know, east versus west, we were talking east versus west, and you're saying it's not really east versus west at all. The coyotes.
No, it's densities.
Densities.
That's it. Some areas of the country are just more dense than others.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's all it really boils down to. A coyote's going to make a living. And what amazes me is there's coyotes living in, the parks in New York, Chicago, downtown LA. I mean, these coyotes are in Chicago. They're eating the rats. I mean, they're right there in town. And a long time ago, a buddy of mine was commissioned. All he had to do was kill 3 or 4 coyotes a month, and they were paying him outrageous amount of money. But he couldn't use traps, and he had to use live traps, and he had to use other things. Well, it didn't take long for those coyotes to figure out those live traps are bad news. And he couldn't. I mean, he could drive around at night with thermal and other things suppressed and shoot some of these coyotes. But I mean, there is a population of coyotes living in downtown Phoenix that they just can't get rid of them. They're so good at living in that close of proximity to humans. So, man, you got to insert yourself in there and figure it out.
I got to ask you a question about, there was one day, it was getting into the darker part of the evening in a bait site that I had set up. And I said, I wonder what happened if I brought my collar out there and just see what happens. And it didn't call in a coyote that day. However, it did key me into a ridge that seemed like there were a number of coyotes that were rendezvousing into that, late, very dusky, early darkness type area. And it was probably a quarter mile from the bait site. Or maybe a little bit more. But boy, and it was one of those naked areas, kind of in a pondy area away from.
So what happens? And I really didn't understand this as well as I was in Kansas last year. I was in a tree stand. It was late October. I'm in a tree stand waiting for a whitetail to walk by, and all of a sudden, this big male coyote. Boom! He's about 300 or 400 yards from me, and then all of a sudden, I hear his mate answer, and then I could hear 2 or 3 other coyotes answer, and they literally were sounding off, and then here they came, and you could hear them. Occasionally they would bark, occasionally they would growl or yip, but they were pushing whitetails. And here comes the deer, And then here comes this coyote. I lip kissed him over there, and I shot his ass out of that tree with my bow. And it really amazed me how there at dark 30, they rallied and then commenced hunting. So I really think that's and so not only did I hear it one night, I heard it of the 7 nights I think we were there. I heard it 5 of the 7 nights at different spots. Those coyotes would push different timber, different draws. And that's how they were making a living, is they were hunting. They were group hunting 4 or 5 together, and they were hunting deer. I know they were hunting those white-tailed deer. And I still saw plenty of does. I still saw plenty of fawns. But I called the guy that I was hunting there. I'm like, you've got the lease on this place. We need to kill coyotes. And it was one of those properties where they would not allow coyote hunting. They wanted to keep it natural, and whatever was there was there. And I said, you are losing a ton of fawns. They are hunting these deer every night. And they would rally and they would hunt. And so if you're hearing them on that ridge, and by having a caller there at your bait site, what you did, if you would just do one single lone howl at that bait site, the coyotes that owned that bait site, that was their core home area, they'd lose their mind. Gotcha. I honestly think they would have to come look. But if you had sat there for a few times, they may circle. You might want to take a buddy and put him 100 yards behind you, because if they come in and they've smelled you there or whatever, they may circle 100, 150 behind you to see if you're there.
Gotcha. Before
they enter the bait site. But having a call at the bait site, I think it'd be a great idea.
Okay. I just tested it and didn't get anything to come into that set that day. But I mean,
they howled back at you.
They did howl back, and then it really keyed me into some other spots that I need to go look at.
I would go to that ridge. I would spread out on that ridge. I would go to calling up there. The first time into that ridge, I would do prey distress in the fall. And then in the wintertime, I'd go in there and vocalize, and do the coyote vocalizations. In the springtime, I'd do the pups. The spring, summer, this May, June, July, when those pups start to poke around, you get in there and play Canine Pups 2 and then Coyote Pup Distress 3 or Coyote Pup Screams. Those adults will come running to protect those pups. And it may open up your summer. I realize I hate ticks, and dang, everywhere I've been, it's June, July. Ticks, for not having much mobility, it seems like I collect them like nobody. Yep. And I hate hunting that May, June, July. But man, I'd risk a tick bite just to kill a coyote. I promise you.
I hear you about the ticks. I think we might be the number 1 state in the nation when it comes to ticks, and we have a severe problem with Lyme disease in New Hampshire, and the deer tick and all kinds of ticks, but mostly the deer tick. And I think everybody on my road's been bit by a tick, and half of them got Lyme disease. So it's right in my home where I live every day.
Yeah.
So I'm used to it. But one of the things I've found is that permethrin seems to, you can walk through one field without it on you and then go spray down and walk through the same field, and where you picked up 50 without it, you pick up 0. The stuff is amazing. So,
amazing. Yeah. Well, I would drink it if it would keep them from getting on me. But there in Kansas, I got 8 up.
Yeah, I don't recommend drinking the stuff, but you spray your clothes, it'll wash through. You can actually use it even after a wash. It's nice. That good, and it will keep the ticks off. And this is coming from the guy who lives in the number 1 tick state infested with Lyme disease in the nation. So,
in that new Powassan, where people can't eat red meat after getting bit by some of these ticks, that's what scares me. If I had to take red meat out of my diet, I think I'd die.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's war on the ticks as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, be safe out there.
So just to summarize what we talked about, if you're kind of new to coyote hunting, you want to go out with a buddy, you're saying set up about 30 to 50 yards downwind of your call. Generally speaking, put your buddy another 50
to 100, just depends on the terrain.
Okay, behind you on that terrain.
But you're having the buddy there, you can cover different fields of fire, and that's where you think those coyotes may come from. If you've got a coyote on a ridge and then you're down in a flat, put your buddy halfway up the ridge. Those coyotes are going to come off the top of that ridge. That might be their rendezvous site, and have him intercept them on the way there, that the wind is good, that you got a good crosswind there, and set up in there with a shotgun or a good rifle that if you can see 50, 60, 100 yards, more distance than that, a shotgun's good to 30, 50 yards. But if you can see further than that, you're going to want a rifle,
right, in
case those coyotes come through. You can woof at them, stop them, and get a good shot at them.
Gotcha. Trying to find the rendezvous sites. You can start with Google Maps. You can look for these dammed up areas. Seems like these are more or less the places that get you excited for new spots you haven't checked out yet.
Yep.
Can you bring in a third hunter too?
Absolutely.
Are there power?
The more
numbers?
the merrier.
Okay.
We had 4 of us last year. It was 2 years ago before the World Championships. 4 of us went out in a day, and we spread the 4 of us out and had a ball. Well, we killed 8 or 9 coyotes in one day, just goofing around on some pretty tough public land in Arizona, and we had a ball. And it was amazing to me how some guy, the guy with the collar would get the shots, and then the guy that was 4th man down the list was getting the shots because they were circling, pretty smart coyotes. So anyway, it was fun. Make it fun. Coyote hunting's fun. That's the bottom line is this is something you can do then actually have fun, but it's going to be so beneficial to all the animals you're trying to promote around your properties.
Let's run down through some of the call sequences and completely dispel the myth here of east versus west. You're saying it's 100% due with coyote density. That's where you're going to have your success or failures most likely.
Yep.
So we'll eradicate that myth. I know Abner was trying to push the east-west thing, but it sounds like it's really it's a density thing. So the style in which you hunt doesn't really change from place to place, but your sequences might based off of the time of year that you're hunting. It sounds like.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all based around them breeding. February 15th is the peak of their rut. The first week of November is where most guys rut the whitetail. February 15th is that week for coyotes. Now, we know that they can breed and lock up with does in October, and we know they will follow them into December, right? Mm-hmm. If there's a yearling doe comes in to heat them, 28 days after mom did. So base that whole calling sequence is based on that 62-day gestation period, just like a dog. Those pups hit the ground the last week. If they bred February 15th, that puts them in the ground the last week of April, first week of May. 13 days, they don't open their eyes. They just lay there in the ground. The next 15 days, they'll poke to the mouth of the den. The next 30 days, when they get 60 days old, they will be roaming around that area, 20, 30, 50 yards of the den. Mom will typically have 3 or 4 different dens. And the number one reason they'll abandon a den with the pups is because they get too many fleas or it gets infested with fleas. And they will move those pups as they mature towards a open water source where the pups don't have to endanger themselves too much from going to the den to get open water. And so water sources are going to be key to finding those pups in June, July. If you're near water, if you have an open water source, a creek or lake, a pond, a guzzler, or anything like that, those coyote pups will be in proximity to open water in June and July. And then mom and dad they start following mom and dad in July and August. They'll start hunting as a pack. Mom and dad somewhere in September, October, kick those pups out. And then they don't want those pups in their area eating food that they're going to need for next year's pup crop. So that whole year, I primarily use Canine Pups 2 and Pup Screams and Pup Distress 3. That will call in a myriad of coyotes while we're dogging May, June, July, and August.
Okay.
August, we switch over into Prey Distress. Rabbit Distress becomes my number one go-to sound. The Lucky Bird, Nutty Nuthatch, Woodpecker, those Prey Distress sounds get me through October, November, December. Around January 1st, January 15th, I switch where I will Prey Distress 15 minutes and then maybe do a few vocals. Up until then, January 15th, I primarily vocalize. And that's single lone howls followed up with some distress, Pup 3, Pup Screams, that high-pitched stuff I do with the diaphragm. And that'll get me back into the summertime stuff. It's not rocket science. It's going out there and using vocals primarily from January to July, August, and then Prey Distress, August, September, October, November, December, and then go back into different vocalizations. And that's territorial vocalizations, that's protective nature vocalizations, and breeding sounds. That's why vocalizations are huge. And
it sounds like,
there's other
so just to clarify, it sounds like when the pups are around, use pup sounds, and when they're a little bit older and they're starting to forage,
hit the feed bag,
and when they're getting into the breeding season, hit their vocalization.
Go back to the territorial, go back to the breeding.
Right.
And that's, I do some estrus yips and estrus whimpers with a diaphragm that, we're going to go record them so everybody can have the same advantage I do with the diaphragm. I'll go in and record my estrus yip and estrus whimpers, and you can't, coyote pair, coyote group yip howls, coyote yip howl. They're sometimes that group really gets them fired up, and sometimes it's the singles, and you've got to go out and play with your coyotes and figure out what's going to trip their trigger. And that's all you're really doing. Fox Pro's just arranging the meeting. You're going out there to try and trip a trigger and get them to come look at you.
Right. Do you have a favorite sequence that you use? And we'll just see. I guess we'll divide these things up into threes. Like you got the vocalization year or months. You got the pup months. You got the feeding months.
Yep.
What are your favorite sequences for each of those phases?
So October, November, December, I will go out there and play Cal's Cottontail, Baby Cottontail, Cagey Cottontail. I mean, you can just sit down October, November, December. You should be able to play a cottontail sound and kill coyotes anywhere in the country. Florida, Vermont, New Hampshire, Alberta, Canada, California, Texas. It doesn't matter. A cottontail, the cottontails are universal. There's lagomorphs in every state, and you should be able to get something to come look at you to eat a rabbit. Now, some people will howl and then rabbit distress. Some people rabbit distress and then howl. Some people, for years, Garvin he thought more than one sound was ridiculous. So we'd only play one sound per stand. Now it seems like I've got the buttons, I've got the ability, I'm going to try and trip a trigger. And so what I've noticed the last few years is it's okay to howl. It's okay to do a lone howl in October and then sit there for 2 or 3 minutes in silence and then play the rabbit distress. There's nothing wrong with that. But you try to unlock that combination that's going to get those coyotes to come look at you. But day in, day out, October, November, December, you should be able to play a cottontail and get a coyote to come look at you. Now, the transition into the breeding season, I will use male coyote howl, female yodel howl. In the pup screams, I do an estrus yip and an estrus whimper, and then I will not leave a stand. And I really, once December hits, I won't leave a stand unless I play Coyote Pup Distress 3. That high pitch pup in distress, it can be so many different things. It can be a breeding, it could be a coyote chewing on a female breeding, or it could be a pup that's getting chewed on by a dominant pair. And if the dominant pair in the area thinks this coyote's getting chewed on, they want to go see who's chewing on this coyote, And so it just really triggers a lot of awesome response. And then, April is turkey season. I got my turkey tag starts next Saturday. I'm going to go down turkey hunting. Mm-hmm. I may make a few stands for the coyotes, but she's going to have these pups in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I kind of want those pups born so I can go bring my dogs down there and beat them up with my dogs. But I will play the canine pups too. It's mostly pup whimpers.
Okay.
And then I'll play pup screams into pup 3. And if there is a coyote in the area that thinks that their pups are in jeopardy, and then coyotes will not tolerate a domestic dog in their core home area. So that's when I do all my dogging. I mean, I've got ranchers, and I mean, we've been up this guy. He's got 10,000 sheep, and they're all lambing here in the next few weeks. And we actually went up there a couple 3 weeks ago and killed 2 coyotes. Where he's going to do all his lambing, and he's so thankful. We were up there calling those coyotes. Last year he lost almost 30 or 40 lambs to
right.
He thinks mainly one pair of coyotes.
Isn't that interesting that they're territorial with dogs, and dog vocalization is a great way to.
It's just, and you can go online, you can YouTube coyote dog, and my buddy Getting Stoked Outdoors, we filmed an episode with an 11-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy, and the 14-year-old boy gets his first coyote. But you see my dogs go out and engage 2 coyotes, and when they run over the hill, there's 3 following my dogs in, and they come into 70 yards, and the kids go to missing, and then he gets lucky and hits one. But it's just exciting calling. It's, if you've ever seen the dog, and if you haven't, go online, look up coyote dogging on YouTube, and you can see it. It's awesome.
Gotcha. Very cool. All right. So if we start this out, I mean, we always are doing like these checks to see, hey, how am I doing? If you had to put a success percentage on it, like the number of times you go out to the number of times that you're successful with an actual visualization of a coyote, never mind just the kill, but just the visualization. What
across the country, 3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Okay.
That's my litmus. You know, if I make 10 stands, I should see coyotes on at least 3 of them.
Okay.
Now, at the World Championship, we made 27 stands in one day. I want to hit on 50% of them. But I've really done my homework. I go a little crazy about that. I mark where the truck parks. I mark where I sit, where the collar goes, where Garvin sits, where his collar goes. Me and Garvin both carry collars. We both carry shotguns and rifles, and we want to hit on 50%. We're going to make 27 stands on day 1. We're going to make 15 stands on day 2. And if you're not hitting on 50% of them and killing those coyotes, you're not going to beat us. And man, that's just a lot of work.
Okay.
But when I'm recreation hunting, when I'm hunting with my buddies, when I'm hunting with my friends, I want to make 5 stands. I'm hoping I'm going to get 1 or 2 of those stands to produce in a day.
Okay. So 3 out of 10 is a good litmus test. And if I'm not hitting 3 out of 10, do I need to adjust my strategies?
Well, what you need to look at is your densities.
Okay.
Really, how many coyotes do you have in your area? There are guys that they might only hit 1 out of 10, and they're doing great, because that's their densities. That's what the coyotes are really going to produce in their area. Honestly, there where I was in Georgia, I mean, I know I could drive just 3 hours from where I was in Georgia to another area of Georgia, and I really think, you better fire on 5 out of 10. But where I was, 1 out of 10 is more like 1 out of 20. Would probably be a more realistic deal.
Gotcha.
Okay. There in Michigan, it was 1 out of 3. It took me 3 stands. I killed a coyote. I really think that's what I can make 3 stands. I should see a coyote.
Okay. Make
3 stands. I should see a coyote.
All right.
There in Michigan, Vermont, I felt the same way. It was about 1 out of 3.
Very good.
Alberta, it was about every other, I better see a coyote every other stand. But there's a lot of coyotes. The density is way better in Alberta than it was in Vermont. The litmus test is, are you having fun? And keep it fun, and don't get frustrated, because, hey, I know it can get frustrating. And I helped a guy in Kentucky. It was a 3-year odyssey. It took him 3 years before he killed his first one. Now he kills them pretty regular. But he learned his area. He learned his uncle's place, and yeah, it took us 3 years to get his first one, but now he's killing pretty regularly. And he's only killing 1, 2, or 3 a year, but that's awesome to him, So you got to keep it in. You got to know your densities. You got to know how many coyotes you have in your area, and just live in that spec. Pennsylvania, if you're seeing the fur taker boys, Abner and the guys are killing more coyotes, it's because the coyotes are growing. The densities, the population is growing in Pennsylvania. So as that population grows, your success rate's going to go up.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Where just 7 years ago, they didn't even really have a coyote on video in Pennsylvania. And now in the last 5 years, they've put a bunch of coyotes on video. So that population's growing. And as the more coyotes come in, the fox population's going down. And the coyote population is growing, and you're going to kill more coyotes because the densities are rising.
Gotcha. We talked a little bit about state regs, and not necessarily regs, but seasons in certain states. Are there any states that don't allow electronic coyote calls?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Everybody will allow you to use them for coyotes.
Okay.
It's the big game stuff. We come out with that Buck Pro, and
I was just about to ask you about that, because I know there's
16 states that I don't think allow it, but you can go onto our website and we have all those states listed. Okay. Like Utah, I live here in Utah. They never allowed electronic game calls, and now they never came out and said it's okay, but it's no longer listed as a bad thing. So you can use electronics for big game now in Utah. So it's kind of exciting. Wyoming, you can. Oregon, you can. I mean, more states are coming online. They realize that it's not that big of an advantage. You still got to go out and do it. You still got to call them in. You still got to hunt them. You still got to shoot them.
Gotcha. All right. So this deer call, have you tried using some of the deer call in some of your setups? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Being the big buck registry, and yes, we're talking about coyote hunting to help your deer population, but I got to hear a little bit more about the deer call, electronic deer call.
The Buck Pro,
the Buck
awesome.
Pro. Okay.
You string it onto a tree. You're sitting in. I mean, I used it in Texas. I killed my biggest whitetail ever, 164-inch whitetail. We were in a high rack, or we were in a stand, an elevated stand. Yeah, we're hunting, in Texas that you can use corn feeders. And then, of course, this buck had been coming in to eat the corn. I said, I'm not going to shoot him under the corn feeder. Let's see if we can call him. And I started calling, and he picked his head up and left the corn. And then I went through the chase is a sequence on the Buck Pro, and he comes back out 150 yards down this 2-track, and I smoked him with the 6mm Creed and on video, and he's my biggest buck ever. And that call got him excited. That call got him to come back out of the brush and come take a look at us. And I really think that's what we're just arranging the meetings. That's what Fox Pro, we're selling fun. It's fun to go out there, push a button, hear that rah, rah, or hear that rabbit going wah, wah, and you're just hoping the coyote or the buck shows up. And when they do, you can position them, and you can place that collar where you can get those deer, those coyotes to position themselves, or you can get a good shot at them. And that's, you don't go fishing with one lure. Don't go hunting with just one call.
Right.
Get out there and the more buttons you press, the more of those collars you put up in the trees for different wind directions and stuff like that, you can position those deer. I'm excited to go bow hunting this year. We might go to Wisconsin. We might go to a couple different places where it's legal to use this Buck Pro and put it to work and see if we can get some of these deer on video.
Very cool. Well, I gotta say thank you for coming back on the show. We've already burned
you
up
guys
an
are
hour.
great,
we
Jay.
could talk forever about this stuff, and I have probably more questions for you. But maybe we'll book another one a year from now so we can touch.
Let's do it. And if you're listening to this Big Buck Registry on the podcast and you've got questions, send them in and we'll hammer through them, man. This is what we do, and our motto at Fox Pro is to stay after them, and that's my advice. Stay after them. Don't get discouraged. Stay after them, and be positive and have fun. That's what it's about.
Very cool. So if they do want to reach out and we haven't answered enough of their questions during the show, or if more questions have started because of our conversation, where should we reach out to you?
Go to gofoxpro.com. We have we're on Facebook too. You can go on our Facebook page and ask questions there. And what's great about our Facebook page is, there's 50, 60 pro staffers out there just waiting to answer questions from people. So don't be afraid. There is no dumb question. If you've got a question, if you've got something burning and you want an answer, give us a shout and we'll answer it the best of our ability.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming into Big Buck Studios and talking coyote with us. It's always a pleasure, always entertaining, always fun, and we'll have to do it again.
Thank you, Jay, and tell those other two bums thanks.
I appreciate Al coming back on the show. It's been a while since we talked to him, and I think a good refresher course was exactly what we needed right now. I love going coyote hunting. Not always successful when I go out, but talking to Al gives me a litmus test as to how I'm doing and what I should be doing next to increase my odds. I like to coyote hunt for several reasons. Just because I like getting out. It gives me something else to hunt in the off season when nothing else is in season. And I think it does really help to maintain that coyote pack, and that the population of coyote in your area will only and ultimately help your deer herd. And you cannot, no matter how hard you try, eliminate all the coyotes. So maintaining the control and management of your coyote in your area is essential to the management and control of the population of your deer herd. It only goes hand in hand and makes sense. So, Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, it's
the Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, use firearms, bows, use bows. Located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Right dead center of the time of year to get these food plots in the ground, Jay. So right now I suggest that if you're going to do a burn down, Roundup, Buccaneer Plus, or whatever you're going to do as far as killing off the weeds in your feed plot area, now's the time to get them sprayed and give it that 14 to 20 day die-off period where you're going to see the green go to dead brown, and once your weeds get dead, then here in a couple of weeks, I suggest at least 14 days. Let that chemical really take care of that weed, and once you get a good kill, then it'll be time to work your ground and get ready to insert whatever foliage you're going to plant. So right now's the time to get out there and put the Roundup on, or if you're going to do a burn in your field, now's the time, man. Get the fields burned off and use your Roundup, or if you do fire burn, you can do that also. But just be careful that you play it safe when you're doing fire burns. And but now's the time, Jay.
Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.